What's going on, YouTube, and welcome back to Goal Line Hockey. It's your boy, Kevin Forte, and today we are taking a look at the Boston Bruins. There is some major stuff coming out in Boston. We might start to get some more stuff on Patrice Bergeron, but the big story this week, obviously I didn't make a video on it, but I figured I'd just put this all into one video. Bruce Cassidy, no longer the head coach of the Boston Bruins. They don't plan on taking a guy in the coaching carousel, so don't expect a Barry Trotz or a Pete DeBoer. Expect a name that we haven't heard before. Potentially a guy in the AHL, potentially a guy in college coming up the ranks to Boston. But I think that is setting the tempo for this offseason, as we've gotten some news about David Pastrnak, which has really been, I would say, the most troubling bit of news out of Boston this week, despite the head coaching change. So we're going to go over everything that's happened in Boston. Like I said, we're starting off with the head coaching thing. Bruce Cassidy's been the head coach of the Boston Bruins for a couple of seasons now. He took over Claude Julien, who was a pretty good coach for the Boston Bruins. They went on some really good runs with him, to the conference finals and stuff like that. And with Bruce Cassidy in 2019, they did go to the Stanley Cup final. They ended up losing to the St. Louis Blues in 2020. I could tell that was kind of the decline of Bruce Cassidy in Boston. Primarily, I remember specifically in the second round of the playoffs, and Bruce Cassidy, that was 2021, which was last year. I remember him throughout the playoffs. He kept blaming the officiating in their series against the New York Islanders. I still have the tank top, the New York Saints, which was Bruce Cassidy's quote after one of the games. The Islanders fans were chanting it, and it just seemed like Cassidy kind of was just taking all the blame away from himself and blaming it on the officiating, which is just utter ludicrous. But I think that was something that, at that point I kind of saw, all right, maybe Cassidy isn't that great of a head coach, because the second you start doing that as a head coach, it's fine for a fan. If a fan's complaining about officiating, whatever. But when you have the head coach of a team complaining about that stuff, that's when I start to question things. And ever since then, I've never really been a huge fan of Cassidy. And now now expect a new head coach, like I said. Don't expect a DeBoer or a Trotz or those names that we've heard around the rumor mill. It's going to be a new guy, which is probably for the best. And that's kind of leading us into the next point here. The Bruins are probably going to start a rebuild. David Pastrnak is actively trying to persuade David Krejci to return to the Boston Bruins. And that was from Kevin Allen. I think a lot's happened since this was discussed from Kevin Allen, because since then, so basically the Bruins wanted Krejci to return, and Pastrnak was the lead guy. Well, that might not be a great selling point right now, because it sounds like David Pastrnak may be on his way out of Boston. The Bruins, looking at guys that are up, their contracts are up next year. There is going to be a lot of new guys in Boston. David Pastrnak leads the list of guys that will be a UFA next summer. Nick Foligno, Craig Smith, Eric Howla, Thomas Nosek, Chris Wagner, Trent Frederick. On the blue line, Matt Grzelcyk is 2 years away. And Connor Clifton and Jeremy Swayman all next season. So the Bruins have a lot of guys that this is kind of what they have. Now, here's the thing. So the Bruins they do have some longer-term contracts. Charlie McAvoy takes him up until the 2029 season. Hampus Lindholm, we know they just re-signed him for an extension. He's here for the next bit. Same thing for Brandon Carlo. He's here till 2027. So those three guys are locked into Boston. And then you have some other guys like Grzelcyk, Forbort, Riley, Zaboral, that are going to be up in 2024. So that's really going to be the next changes to the Bruins blue line is in 2 years from now, because unless they make some trades here, most of those guys are kind of locked into the Bruins. But like I said, really next year is going to be the year of the forwards in Boston, because you look at all those guys that are going to be UFAs next year. And it's setting up pretty much for the Bruins to have a very active trade deadline next year, potentially moving out guys that could be rentals, like Foligno, Craig Smith, and Howla, and Nosek, and Wagner. Those guys could be all guys that are traded as rentals at the trade deadline. Now, here's the other thing that's a little bit concerning. Patrice Bergeron has not signed a contract yet with the Bruins. Brad Marchand having hip surgery this summer. He's not going to start this season. It might be 6 to 8 months. He might be out all of next season. So now you're talking about no Patrice Bergeron, no Brad Marchand. Charlie McAvoy is not going to start the season either. He's having surgery as well this summer. He's going to be out probably till December and January. Again, those are your 3 core players out. Oh, yeah. And now David Pastrnak seems like he may not be playing a game for the Bruins next season because he's a year away from UFA. And from the looks of things, if Don Sweeney is not fired as general manager of the Bruins, David Pastrnak will not re-sign with the Bruins. So now you're talking about Patrice Bergeron leaving in free agency. Marchand and McAvoy being out potentially 5 to 6 months to start the season, and they might not play till game 60 to 70 of the season. And at that point, if the Bruins are already in a tailspin, do you even want to bring those guys back at the end of the season? So now you're down 3 of your top guys. One of them retiring probably, Patrice Bergeron. Oh yeah, and then your leading goal scorer, David Pastrnak. Bye-bye, he gets traded. So what do you do? What do you do in that situation? Well, it's kind of easy. It's kind of setting up for a rebuild, right? And I don't think Bruins fans like that idea necessarily, right? Because, you're remembering all the good things and all these guys. But, worst case scenario. Best case scenario. Worst case scenario during the season, the Bruins are one of the worst teams in the league. Okay. But that it could also lead to the best case scenario, which is they could be getting a generational talent in next year's draft. A centerman playing for the Regina Pats right now, Connor Bedard. What if the Bruins went and got Connor Bedard next season to replace Patrice Bergeron? That would be pretty insane. But again, the Bruins, it just does not seem like this roster is going to work. And when we know that a guy like Jake DeBrusk could also be on his way out, again, he's asked for that trade, and now if the team's not going to be any good, he might even want to trade even more. So the Bruins are going to look, I'm going to say, by next summer, after free agency, after the draft next summer, this will be a completely different Boston Bruins hockey team. Because, again, even a year from now, we're looking at Brad Marchand and Taylor Hall. Their contracts are up in the summer of 2025. That's not that far away when you think about it. It's 3 seasons from now. They're both in their mid-30s, right? Hall 30, Marchand 34. So, I mean, if you want to talk about just completely rattling the cage and just busting this thing completely open, it is not out of the realm of possibility that the Bruins just light this thing on fire and just completely overhaul it. Because, let's be honest, let's say they start the rebuild this year. Well, you've got Taylor Hall, who's already 31 at that point, probably starting next season or at some point, right? Taylor Hall, 31. Marchand, he's already 34, 35. He's not even playing next season. So, what do you really do here? Now, unfortunately for Marchand, and I was listening to the 32 Thoughts podcast, shout out to Jeff Merrick and Elliot Freeman, they were talking about hip surgeries being a real concern for NHL players because you look at guys in particular, specifically right now, the Rocket in Dallas, Tyler Seguin, the Man Rocket down there. I mean, the problem with Seguin is he has not had his game since he has come back from his hip surgery. Hip surgeries are kind of a big deal. We're also seeing that right now with, I believe it's Kevin Hayes with the Philadelphia Flyers. He's coming off a hip surgery, and they really weren't sure what to do with him at the end of this season, right? Do we want him to play a little bit? Is he healthy? He didn't really look all that healthy. It was one of those things, and you guys could correct me. I don't think there's going to be many Flyers fans watching this, but I'm pretty sure it was Kevin Hayes. But the Boston Bruins, man, there could be a lot coming here. Now, these are the reports. So this is David Pastrnak is reportedly not happy with the Bruins. The team may have to consider gauging the trade market for him per Fluto Shinzawa. The team wants to re-sign him, but he was unhappy with the firing of Bruce Cassidy. Kind of interesting, as well as how management handled Torrey Krug and David Krejci's contract negotiations. Things will have to change, or Pastrnak may not be a Bruin for much longer, and Sweeney will not let him go for nothing. So that's interesting. There is, quote-unquote, no chance David Pastrnak resigns if Don Sweeney remains GM. Per Bruins reporter and insider, same thing. He's unhappy with the situation with Krug, Pastrnak, and Krejci, and the Bruce Cassidy situation. The Bruins would like to sign Pastrnak, but if he will continue this path, Sweeney will not let him go for nothing. Already saw that. So just kind of interesting how things have kind of turned on a dime, right? He was just trying to, make a pitch to return David Krejci to Boston, and next thing you know, all of a sudden David Pastrnak is getting traded. But I think that has to do with the situation around Bruce Cassidy getting fired. So like I said, this could be really this is kind of it for the Bruins. Now, the thing that sucks for the Bruins is they do not have their second round pick for the next 2 years of drafts. So they do have their second round pick in 2022, but they don't have a second round pick in 2023 or 24. So the Bruins have taken some draft capital out, and you wonder if they look to recoup some of that with some of these trades like Pastrnak. Do you trade a Charlie Coyle? Is that even a tradable contract? He's making $5.25 till 2026. This is going to be interesting. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. What do you think is next for the Boston Bruins? Because, you could be looking at just a total wholesale, like a complete fire sale in Boston. And is that what's best for the team? Or do you think these guys should stick it out, try and continue to grind it out? Honestly, I think you accept your fate. I think you have to accept the fact that, we weren't able to win in the playoffs. Carolina dominated, and you're only getting worse. Especially if Bergeron leaves. I think that is something they're kind of holding out hope for. If Bergeron sticks around, but if he's seeing all this stuff about Pastrnak, and he's seeing all this stuff with Cassidy and everything else that's happening, maybe do they just completely start off with a clean sheet of paper? Let me know what you guys think. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you again next time. Go Bruins.